distinct pleasure and honor to introduce somebody. I asked her, how did you want me to introduce? I was like, is there anything long? She's like, just say whatever, So Sister Linda Sarsour is a working woman. She's a racial justice and civil rights activist. Basically, she is every Islamophobe's worst nightmare. Please welcome to the stage Sister Linda Sarsour.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am deeply honored and humbled to be here and so proud of the work of the Muslim Legal Fund of America. And I want you to know that I believe in them so much, but more than just I believe in them, I want to contextualize why they're so important in particular right now. A lot of speakers come to these events and they're supposed to be the people that inspire you and they're like really motivational and inspirational. That's not really what I do. My job in the Muslim community is to remind you of the moment that you live in and remind you of the things that are happening outside of this room that are directly impacting our communities. Because sometimes in the Muslim community, I don't think you and I watch the same news. I don't know if people actually understand the real threats that we are under as a community. And I will say to all of you that I am a standing, living, breathing example of the impacts of being a Muslim American in these United States of America in 2018. This administration has only been in office for less than 2 years, and I'm 38 years old, and I feel like I'm 88 years old. I feel like I've done more work in the last 2 years than the last 18 years that I have been doing this. And if you don't know what this administration has done to our communities, what they have been, not just our communities, our sister communities, but oftentimes we think things are happening to other people, but don't actually know that our people are also impacted by those things. It was only 1 week this administration was in office when they announced the Muslim ban. And the Muslim ban really bothers me. And it bothers me not just because we are banning people from coming to America. It has bothered me in the way in which the Muslim community has risen up to fight against the Muslim ban. And I always visualize that when something like this was going to happen to our community, that our community would rise up. Let's not exaggerate. People say we're 3 to 5 million Muslims in America. I want to see 1 million Muslims at least get on these streets and say, absolutely not. But unfortunately, that did not happen. So it was a weekend, the administration announced the Muslim ban. Muslim ban 1, Muslim ban 2, Muslim ban 3, we went to Muslim ban 4, then we went to the Supreme Court. Sisters and brothers, you, the Muslim American community, you lost in the Supreme Court. Now it is law that these people from our communities are banned from bringing their families into these United States of America. And I always ask Muslims, I don't know what you need. I really sometimes I sit and I think about our community. How many more countries do you need on the list for the Muslim community to rise up? Do they have to add Egypt? Do they have to add Jordan? Do they have to add Morocco and Algeria? What other countries need to be? Pakistan, India? What has to happen for the Muslim community to finally stand up and say, not on our watch, absolutely not. A lot of you today here either have your children here with you or your children are waiting for you at home. Why is it okay, or why are you okay with being able to go home, tuck your children in, play with your children, love your children, but fathers and mothers from Yemen can't be reunited with their families? Mothers from Somalia can't see their children. Why is it that Iranian families can't be together, and you take for granted that you get to be here in these United States with your family, that you get to travel and come back to this country, and there are families around the world who are literally separated from the people that you love. Sisters and brothers, your love for your children is not more than the love that a Yemeni father has for his children who are sitting in Djibouti right now, waiting to get a visa that is never going to come. This administration, sisters and brothers, is caging children at the borders. They are throwing tear gas at asylum seekers at the borders with your taxpayer dollars, and we continue to turn a blind eye. This administration has stripped 23 million Americans of health care. They have sold the largest arms deal to Saudi Arabia, who is now waging a war on the people of Yemen. Not only are the people of Yemen banned from coming here, but they're also experiencing one of the most brutal wars we've ever seen. And over 80,000 children in Yemen have been killed or have died of cholera or malnutrition. This administration has ended a program called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. 800,000 young people in America who are undocumented, many of whom are Muslim from our communities. They stripped them of their legal status. But what makes that even worse is not just the 800,000 kids who are impacted by this DACA rescindment, it's also 11 million of their family members who are also undocumented. Because DACA kids actually were safer before they had DACA. They went and gave all their information to the government. They know where they live, they know where they work, they know where their family members are. So now we have put 11 million undocumented people, people who work for us, people who are our neighbors, people who go to school with us, go to school with our children at fear of deportation. The deportation forces are out and you see them. They are showing up to housing courts. They show up at hospitals and are stripping people from their families. We saw immediately in a place like Michigan, 120 Chaldeans were rounded up. Every single day in America, there is a raid on a meat packing industry, on a factory. One of these days, they're gonna come to the mosques, just like they did in places like Michigan, which is 100 miles from the border. And in places like Texas, remember, you have 100 miles from the border too. So we have to realize what is happening around us at the hands of this administration. This administration, this president decided one day to stand on the national stage, and because he thinks it's as easy as just words of declaration, I make many declarations, he stood up and declared that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel, and I'm going to declare here to you all at the Muslim Legal Fund of America that Jerusalem is the capital of Palestine and will always be the capital of Palestine. Stripping 200,000 Salvadorans of temporary protected status, 60,000 Haitians of temporary protected status, not renewing Syrian temporary protected status, waiting for them to renew Yemeni temporary protected status. Sisters and brothers, they do not want any of us in this country. It's very clear to me what is happening. The thing that really shook me in the last week is when I saw an article where Central Americans at the border who are waiting on a line to be processed had numbers on their arms. Sisters and brothers, we've seen this before in history. Numbers on the arms, it just doesn't end well. One of the things I have noticed going around to the Muslim community, I've been to like 45 states out of 50 states in America. Somebody send me to Hawaii, that's where I need to go.
I will.
I'm telling you, I need to go to Hawaii, somewhere far away from here. Japan actually, maybe even just a little bit farther than Hawaii, just kidding. I go to a lot of places and people invite me to come to speak to Islamic schools, to come to speak at mosques and things like that. And I love that because I'm an organizer and I love to meet people, I love to talk to people, I love to educate and do political education and training. And one of the things that bothers me the most about Muslim communities, when you go somewhere and the Muslims say, Sister Linda, at this masjid, we don't do politics here. We're not political, Sister Linda. We don't like to do politics and do too much, just do something about like Muslim women, empower Muslim women or something like that. And what I have to remind Muslims in America, every single Muslim, whether you are a Muslim American or not a Muslim American, whether you're an immigrant, whether you just showed up here, that if you woke up this morning and you are breathing and you are Muslim, you are political. You have no choice but to be political. You live in a country that has politicized you. They have racialized you as a Muslim community. Your faith has been politicized. They are passing policies and executive orders based on the faith that you follow. So you can't walk around saying, I am a Muslim that is not political. You don't actually get to answer the question because it is already predetermined that you are political in these United States of America and you have no choice but to be engaged politically and to support the organizations that are defending your rights to be a Muslim in America. Because what the Muslims do is they'll come to these events and they'll be like, I don't know, I have to take my kids on a vacation during the Christmas vacation, and then my wife wants a car, so I need this $3,000 to put a deposit on a car, because they haven't been hit by the oppression directly. But then they realize 6 months later when the FBI comes knocking on their door, they start saying, Allah, I should have supported the Muslim Legal Fund of America. I mean, I would be ashamed if I was from Dallas and the FBI came to my house and I had to pick up the phone and call Khalil, but I didn't donate when I was at the banquet. Like honestly, like I wouldn't even do it. So we have to realize, sisters and brothers, this is about foresight. I'm just saying. One of the things I always think about in the Muslim community, and I talk to a lot of young people in the Muslim community, and I didn't go to Islamic school. I went to public school in New York City. My parents were working class. They had 7 children in a span of 10 years. My parents couldn't afford to send me to private school. So I went to public school, and I'm very grateful that my parents sent me to public school. But you know how the parents who send their kids to public school, what do? They make their kids go to school 7 days a week. So I went to school, Islamic school, on Saturdays and Sundays. And when I grew up, I realized that I was cheated out of an Islamic education. And I realized that when I was being taught, for example, the seerah of our beloved Prophet Muhammad, they were leaving things out, or they just didn't know how to explain them the right way. And what I realized was, as I grew older and I did my own exploration and my own reading, I interpreted that our beloved Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him, was actually a human rights activist. So when people say about me that I'm a Muslim activist, right, or that I choose to be an activist, or that activism is something separate than Islam, then you actually don't understand who your beloved Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him. I am an activist not because it's cool, it's because it's part of my deen. And in following in the footsteps of our beloved Prophet Muhammad is why I do this work. So how is our beloved Prophet Muhammad, how was he an activist? He was a human rights activist. When you looked for him, where was he? He always chose to be amongst the most disenfranchised and the poor. He always stood up for what was right, no matter what the consequences were. He was, in fact, even an environmental justice activist. He talked about how the trees and the earth and the lakes and the oceans were blessings that were given to us by Allah, so we should take care of the earth around us. Believe it or not, he was also an animal rights activist. I remember one time being in San Diego at a workers' rights rally around raising the living wage. And I saw an imam walk up to the stage, Imam Taha, many of you know him from the Islamic Center of San Diego. He stood up on the stage, and there was a lot of non-Muslims there, and he said, our beloved Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him, said, pay the worker before the sweat on his forehead dries. And as a young person, I stood up there and I was like, look at that. Our beloved Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him, was also a worker rights activist. So sisters and brothers, when you talk about whether you want to be an activist, whether you want to be engaged, whether you want to do this, it's really not a question for me. The question for you is, are you willing to follow the steps of our beloved Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him? Are you ready to give compassion to your Muslim sisters and brothers and those others who are living amongst us in our society? Are you ready to give them mercy? Sisters and brothers, I have watched people in our community who turned their back on this young Palestinian sister that Charles and Khalil talked about, Nur Salman. Our community turned their back because of the lack of moral courage that they had in their heart, even though they knew for a fact that that young sister was innocent. There were Muslim lawyers in our community that were like, we will not touch this with a 10-foot pole, because the minute that they hear the word terrorism, they walk away. Sisters and brothers, that is not our deen, that is not our faith. Our faith is centered around courage and standing up against injustice, even if it's against our own parents. A lot of times I hear people in the Muslim community, they love this at the interfaith events. That's why I don't do like regular interfaith. I don't just go to the church and say, I'm like you, you're like me, we believe in the same God, and we all go home. That's not, if your interfaith organizing doesn't include you and I finding common practices within our faith that stand up against injustice, I don't need that interfaith work. That's fake interfaith work. So if you do that, where you go read scripture and break some bread and you go home and you don't do nothing with the faith that you both follow, that is not real interfaith work, and you are actually engaging in a waste of time. But anyway, a lot of imams will go up on these stages and they'll say Islam is a religion of peace. And that's it. First of all, Islam is a religion of peace. Just like I believe all faiths are religions of peace that were brought to this earth to bring people together. But what I wish I would hear from more imams around the country, from more leaders around the country, is that in fact, Islam is a religion of justice. And there cannot be peace without justice. So if you are not a people that is working to bring justice to the communities in which you live, are you in fact following Islam in its entirety, in its totality? Justice is a central concept, sisters and brothers, to our deen. And in order for us to fight for justice, we have to have confidence and courage and believe in the word of Allah, because it tells us everything that we need to know. So I'm going to give you an example of something that happened to me. And when these things happen to me, I always think of MLFA. It's really sad, actually. 2 years ago, I went to ISNA. And I was a keynote speaker at the luncheon at ISNA. It was just like this, a little bigger room. You know, it was ISNA, obviously. There were all the leaders from all the organizations. Even Khalil might have actually been there. And I went up on the stage and I did exactly what I was doing here. I was like, look, Trump, and we got to do this, and the Muslims got to stand up, and y'all got to get organized, and we're not outnumbered, we're just out organized. You know, the usual stuff that you hear from me. And then I shared a story. I said that there was a man who asked our beloved Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him, what is the best form of jihad or struggle? And our beloved Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him, responded and said, the best form of jihad or struggle is a word of truth to a tyrannical ruler. Sisters and brothers, am I the first person that you ever heard say that hadith before? I heard it about 1,500 times. And I'm sure those who are older than me have heard it 15,000 times. And by the way, let me be very clear. It was being recorded. I was on Facebook Live. I knew what I was saying. Everything was fine. MashaAllah, great ISNA. We all go home. Everything's great. I wake up on Monday morning. I look at my phone. Sister Linda, where are you? Sister Linda, are you safe? Where are your children? I was like, what is wrong with these people? What's going on here? So you know the natural thing you do in 2000. This was in 2017. I went to Twitter. I was like, if something happened, somebody's talking about it on Twitter. I literally went on Twitter, and wallah al-azim, I screenshotted this, and it's going to go into some history book one day. My picture was on the top, trending internationally. Number 1, Linda Sarsour. Number 2, jihad was trending. When I saw jihad trending, I knew exactly what happened. The son of the President of the United States of America tweeted that I was calling for a holy war against the President of the United States of America. They said that I should be arrested for treason. They were calling for my assassination. Sisters and brothers, it was the most horrific thing that I have ever experienced in my entire life. So then I had a brother in the Muslim community, a very well-known brother, that I love dearly, and I respect him dearly. He called me up and he said, Sister Linda, are you okay? Do you need anything? I'm calling you because I want to give you some advice. Sister Linda, you have to be careful. You can't be saying these things. And maybe what you should do is, maybe you could write a statement and apologize and say that you wish you had used better words. And I said to the brother, I don't really quite understand what you're saying when you say you could have used better words. I said, what better words than the words of our beloved Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him? I'm not really quite understanding where you're going with it. And I was horrified by what was happening, but I was even more horrified and heartbroken by my Muslim brother, who was a leader in our community. And what I sensed from him, he was weak. And he didn't have that moral courage that we look for in our leaders. Then I had another brother from our community have a similar conversation with me. And just to be clear, there were plenty of Muslims that were like, you do you, sis, we got your back. But these two in particular were very concerning to me. So when I hung up with these two brothers, I had two choices. One was to heed their advice and put out some sort of clarification statement and say that I could have used better words, that maybe I shouldn't use words that Islamophobes have misinterpreted for their own agenda. Or the other choice I had was to double down. So you all know me, I'm Palestinian, I'm from Brooklyn. So I doubled down. And so the reason why I doubled down was because I reflected for about an hour after those brothers called me. I said to myself, wait a minute. Nobody gets to tell me how to preach and practice my faith in these United States of America. We as Muslims do not tell Christians how to practice their faith. We don't tell Jews how to practice their faith, or Buddhists or Sikhs. Why do we, as Muslims, allow those who are in opposition to our faith to predetermine what we can say, when we can say it, how we can say it, where we can say it? I said, absolutely not. So the Washington Post called me, and I said to the opinion editor, I said, look, stop talking about me without me. I need a place to say what I gotta say. He said, you got 900 words, say what you gotta say. And I wrote for the Washington Post, and I said, it is my right, number one, to practice my faith, to interpret my faith, and as a fluent Arabic speaker, I get to define what jihad is, not an Islamophobe who Googled it online. Sisters and brothers, it was so remarkable. Right after I wrote that Washington Post editorial, everybody started talking about what jihad meant to them. And we as a Muslim community were able to define it in mainstream outlets all over the country. Even Fox News was allowing our imams to go on Fox News to talk about what jihad in fact actually meant. Huffington Post had a big piece. The New York Times had an op-ed. Imam Umar Suleiman wrote something. It was remarkable. And then young Muslims started saying and being able to speak with such honesty and truth about reclaiming a word that belongs to us in the Muslim American community. And if I have to be the proxy for the opposition to give that moral courage to the young people of our community, sisters and brothers, I would be proud to leave this earth as someone who sacrificed everything so that I can be a whole Muslim in these United States of America. But don't think that I wasn't thinking about MLFA in the process. Because when the son of the most powerful man in the world is talking about treason and talking about all these other crazy things, you don't think that I sat back and said, just in case something happens, I'm gonna pick up the phone and call MLFA and they definitely gonna take my case. But there was even a more recent time where I thought about MLFA. The Tree of Life shooting where a white supremacist went in a synagogue and killed 11 innocent Jews happened on a Friday night into Saturday. That Monday, I worked from home. Now, for safety reasons. So I'm sitting at home, I'm talking to a friend on the phone, my doorbell rings. I look out the door and there are two white men wearing flannel button-down shirts with little puff vests and jeans standing in front of my house. So I tell my friend, there are these two white men. She said, do not open the door. The problem is I'm a nosy Arab, and I would have never forgave myself, and I would never have been able to sleep at night if I didn't figure out why those two white men were in front of my house. So then I said to her, I understand your concern, but there's also some construction happening outside my house. So I feel a little safe opening the door because there are 5 other men that are literally fixing the porch outside of my house. I said, okay, cool. But I gotta stay on the phone with you. So I put my phone on speaker, I held my phone down, I opened the door. How can I help you? Are you Linda Sarsour? Yes, I am. Who are you? We are from the New York State FBI office. Let me see your badges, let me see your IDs. So I verified that they were in fact FBI agents. So of course, my Know Your Rights training immediately kicked in. I said, well, I'm not comfortable speaking to you without my lawyer. So the FBI agent says to me, we respect your wishes and we understand your concerns. Because as a Muslim, when an FBI agent knocks on my door, you already know where we go as Muslims. I'm like, what happened? I know for 1,000% that I'm innocent. I didn't do anything. But this country has taught us that all you gotta be is be a Muslim. So my mind went somewhere else. So when I said to him, I'm not comfortable speaking to you without my lawyer, he said to me again, we respect your wishes and we understand your concerns, but we're not here to investigate you nor anybody that you know. We are here to give you important and credible information about a threat to your life. You're gonna think this is really crazy, sisters and brothers. When he said to me, we're here to give you credible information about a threat to your life, I actually, my heart was like, I know, it's crazy, wallahi al-azim. I was so shook. by the fact that there were FBI agents at my door that I was so like, oh my God. You know how your mind goes. You start thinking Islamophobe. Somebody you caught a fake case. Something happened. And when he said to me, and he was so concerned, he actually had genuine concern in his eyes. And I can't share the exact credible threat with all of you yet. But I literally felt like 5,000-pound bag of rocks was lifted off my back. Because in the process of them talking to me, all I could think of was, I'm gonna call MLFA and this is all gonna go away. Seriously, like this is how crazy it means to be a leader and an activist and an organizer in the Muslim American community. That in fact, my mind didn't go to say, maybe they were coming to tell me about a threat to my life. I thought something totally different. And I share that with you because in the United States of America, I always wonder if Muslims also understand that the justice system is supposed to work for you like it's supposed to work for everybody else. And I understand from the experiences that we've had as a Muslim community that there are 2, maybe 3 separate justice systems in America. One is for Muslims, one is for Black people and other brown people, and then one is for everybody else, most of whom are white or white passing Americans. That's just the facts. I don't know anybody else that gets convicted on secret evidence. And when you go and try to figure out why someone is sitting in some maximum security federal prison in a place like Indiana, they say, well, we don't know why we're in here because if we are told why we're in here, it's like a breach of national security. What kind of justice system puts people behind bars and puts you in solitary confinement and says they can't tell you why you're in here because it's a threat to national security? They do that here in the United States of America. In 2006, the Bureau of Prisons created the Communications Management Units, what we call the CMUs. Muslims are like 1.5% of the US population. We make up about 70% of the CMUs. So the CMUs, sisters and brothers, and the reason why they call them communication management units is because exactly that, they manage your communications. You can only pick one family member to speak to. You don't have access to the media. You don't have access to anything happening in the world around you. God forbid you get access to your lawyer on a regular basis. It is a serious place, and Muslims and those that are part of these conspiracy to terrorism cases find themselves in places like CMUs. I mean, we can sit here for days, sisters and brothers. How many men languished in Guantanamo Bay and have never been charged with a crime? Those were people's fathers and brothers and uncles, sons. We don't realize sometimes that we act so disconnected. And like I said, you just never know when things come to your doorstep. You think the men at the Holy Land Foundation thought that one day was going to come to their doorstep? People in our community don't realize how much we have to invest in building the infrastructure to protect our rights. And when I say our rights, I mean your rights in this room. We don't know, sisters and brothers, when they're gonna come knocking at our doors. And we have seen injustice. This is what's crazy about the Muslim community. Every single day there's a story about an injustice against the Muslim in America. And it's almost like we keep ignoring it until it gets closer and closer and closer to us. We should be doing the opposite. When we see an injustice far away, we want to keep it as far away as possible from us. But we do the opposite in the Muslim community. We just keep waiting till it gets to us, and then we rise up when it's at our doorstep. And then we expect everybody else to come out and support us, but we were never there for anybody else when they needed us. This is not, sisters and brothers, how it works. And this is not what it means to fight for justice for all people. And I'll just end by giving you 2 thoughts. Because I always sense this thing in the Muslim community, right? Like, oh, do I support Muslim Legal Fund in America? And they're really taking on these really hard cases, CARE. The Islamophobes are always going after CARE. There's a lot of that in the Muslim community. It really bothers me. Because I know the reason why a lot of Muslims will say that is because they don't actually understand the history of the United States of America. And it bothers me that the Muslims, and I'm talking about Muslims, immigrants, descendants of immigrants. I'm not talking about Black Muslims or African American Muslims, because they unfortunately know the history of this country all too well. Even the Muslim community, when it's January, all the Muslim organizations, mashallah. Dr. Martin Luther King said, all of us, all the Muslims, and you watch Facebook during MLK weekend, the Muslims all become experts on Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King, mashallah, he was a leader. We should all be like Dr. Martin Luther King. Sisters and brothers, when I tell you that the Muslims have no idea who Dr. Martin Luther King, I'm telling you I'm not lying, because I've had this conversation many times. When you hear somebody say, I don't know if I want to support CARE, I don't know if I want to support Muslim Legal Fund of America for these reasons, let me tell you about Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. Martin Luther King was not the man that they told you he was today. If you pulled up the New York Times 50 years ago, when Dr. Martin Luther King, before he got assassinated, they said that his commentary against the Vietnam War, when he started becoming anti-militarism, they said that his commentary was becoming borderline treasonous. They started saying he was becoming militant and radical. The organizations that Dr. Martin Luther King organized with at the time were blacklisted by the US government. When we talk about informants, you think informants is a new thing? They were sending informants in the Black Civil Rights Movement before either you came to America or before you were born. It's nothing new, sisters and brothers. This is a long-standing tactic, sending informants. And guess what? When we say informants, they weren't sending white people into the civil rights movement. They were sending people who looked like them. Just like they send us people who look like us and who speak our languages into our communities. Dr. Martin Luther King was a black radical revolutionary. He was also a man of faith. He believed in God, and his faith was centered to the organizing that he did. He was also a victim of police brutality. He wrote you a letter from the Birmingham jail. He wasn't writing you a letter from some ivory tower office. He wrote you a letter from the Birmingham jail. So when you think about Dr. Martin Luther King, just remember back 50 years ago, nobody wanted to touch Dr. Martin Luther King. And I actually highly recommend for all of you, so you can just appreciate the work of groups like MLFA and CARE. There is a documentary on YouTube called King in the Wilderness. King in the Wilderness. And it's a documentary that looks at Dr. Martin Luther King's life in the last 18 months before he got assassinated. He had a sadness in his eyes. Because even people that were in his movement, when he started getting bolder and more courageous and more intersectional in his work, when he became more vocal and started bringing more people together, when his voice got louder against the status quo, people started walking away from Dr. Martin Luther King, even the people that said they were his dearest friends. And when I think about Dr. Martin Luther King in particular, he was a year older than I am when he got assassinated. And Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, was a year younger than I am. So all of us, sisters and brothers in this room, you don't know how long you have to live. So when Khalil was saying, give $100 a month till I don't know whenever, how do you know that you're gonna live that long to be able to fulfill your amana and your commitment? So for me, if I'm gonna commit to something, I'm gonna do it as soon as possible because I don't know if tomorrow's promised to me. And I'm okay with that. And we have to understand that as a Muslim community and as Muslims, that God takes you when he feels like it. So your commitment today is to our community, it's a commitment to your children. And one of the thoughts that I have always in my mind, like a nightmare that kind of keeps me up at night, and I go to a lot of masjid fundraisers and they're like, tonight we're gonna raise $1 million. And they had just given me a tour of that masjid like 5 hours ago. And I was thinking to myself one time when I went to a masjid, I won't tell you where, I looked around and I was like, $1 million for what? This masjid already is huge. Wallah, they were telling me how they got the tiles from Turkey. I swear to God, chandeliers from the ceiling. It was the most beautiful place I've ever been to. And I was coming to a fundraiser I wasn't even clear originally why I was there. But apparently it was $1 million fundraiser for the masjid. And my nightmare always is when I look at all these beautiful masajid around the country, and we have, sisters and brothers, mashallah, we got a lot of mosques. Like a lot. Like more mosques than the people to be in the mosque. Like seriously, I'm not even exaggerating. So anyhow, my nightmare is about Muslim families 100 years from now. And mind you, none of you are going to be here 100 years from now. I sure am not going to be here. If there are babies here, they might be. But generally speaking, we're not going to be here 100 years from now. And I always think about a Muslim family who's sitting in a basement somewhere, whispering really quietly. And they're looking around and saying, why don't our women wear hijab? Why are the Islamic schools boarded up? Why are those beautiful multi-million-dollar masajid, why are they empty? Why doesn't anybody go to the mosque? Why are our children so afraid to say that they are Muslims? What were those people, what were those Muslims doing 100 years ago? Why weren't those Muslims standing up for our right to be Muslims in America? Why were they such cowards? Sisters and brothers, my mission in life, every day when I wake up, I think about those Muslims 100 years from now. I don't know who they are. They might be my great-great-grandchildren. I want those Muslims 100 years from now to be more unapologetically Muslim than I am today. I want them to say, MashaAllah, who were those Muslims 100 years ago, our ancestors, that stood up for us, that fought boldly for us so that we can be 150% unapologetic Muslims in America. Look at our beautiful daughters wearing hijab. Look at these full mosques, and they built more mosques to come. That we are Muslim lawyers and Muslim members of Congress. 2 Muslims in Congress is cute, but it ain't enough, sisters and brothers. We're gonna have Muslim mayors and Muslim governors. Sisters and brothers, we have been in these United States of America since before it was called the United States of America. And I will remind you that when you walked into this room at MLFA and you sat on the seat, you probably never asked yourself this question. You think that you just showed up one day, that you were just born, or that your Indian grandfather or your Palestinian grandfather who came here after the 1967 war, or your Lebanese family who came here after the Civil War just showed up and got on an airplane, and then they got to the United States and they were like, Salaam alaikum, we're Muslims. This is not how it works in this country. Somebody sacrificed for you so that when you came to America, you could go to a masjid and you can ask where the masjid is. These masjids didn't just come up out of nowhere. This research goes back, number one, to Muslim expeditionists who came here before this land was ever discovered. And then after that, Muslims came as part of one of the most horrific slave trades in the history of humanity. And that 25 to 30% of enslaved people, enslaved Africans, were Muslims. Let me just be clear. When they went to Africa, they didn't find slaves in Africa. Those were people. People with families and livelihoods, and people who had ties to land, and people who had children and wives. They enslaved them and brought them here to the United States of America. And I remember reading a story where a white slave master was observing slaves praying. Sisters and brothers, how would an enslaved person who doesn't have a watch figure out how to pray and be connected to their deen? By watching the sunrise and the sunset. Sisters and brothers, when we talk about Islamophobia, and I get it, it exists, but the thing that gives me resilience is that I am a descendant of enslaved African Muslims who figured out how to be Muslim under the watch of white slave masters who tortured them and tortured their wives and raped their daughters. And if they could still believe that there was God and they can keep their deen in their hearts, and when they were semi-free people, because black people are not wholly free in America, but when they were semi-free people, they inspired our Syrian and Yemeni and Pakistani and Indian and North African Muslim families to come to this country and build the infrastructure of the Muslim community that we are here. This is why I'm unapologetically Muslim. Not because I want to be unapologetically Muslim, because I have every right to be, and I have no choice but to honor the legacies of people who came before me in this country, and to make sure that there are going to be more generations of people like me and you who are unapologetically Muslim in these United States of America. And that the Constitution of the United States of America applies to you and me, whether anybody likes it or not. And that is why we need groups like the Muslim Legal Fund of America to ensure that that Constitution always applies to us and that our religion is never a factor in the cases that are brought in front of these federal courts in this country. May Allah bless the people of the Muslim Legal Fund of America that sacrifice every day, put their reputation and time on the line. And I dearly thank our brother Charles Swift. Charles doesn't have to do this. He really doesn't have to do this. There aren't a lot of people in our country that are willing to stand with us unapologetically in the way that Charles has decided to do. And I ask that God bless him and his family, and that he stays protected, and that his family is protected, and that we as a Muslim community got his back like he got our back, and that you have the back of the Muslim Legal Fund like they got your back. May Allah instill in our hearts moral courage for us to be unapologetically Muslim every day. And that when you all meet your Lord, and you know that's one thing we all have in common, we're all going to meet our Lord. And when our Lord asks you, what did you do to defend Islam, to defend your deen, to defend your beloved Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him, you could at least say, I gave my resources to an organization that defended my right to be a whole Muslim in these United States of America. You can at least have that answer, because I know that there's much more that we can all do, but the least that we can do is support those that are willing to stand on the front lines of protecting our deen in these United States of America. So thank you, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. Have a wonderful evening.